stupid enough to shoot your own foot off. And there are examples of people that shoot their own foot off in the history of war and the history of civilization. But ultimately, what history's telling us is the team that is most coordinated, that channels energy, always wins. And Bitcoin's a good bet just because it's digital energy, and the advantage you have versus using metallic energy in the form of gold or using political energy in the form of fiat paper is so much greater that the deck is just stacked against everybody else. Now the question is just who's going to jump on it and how fast. Which politician, which big tech company, right? If Apple gets on Bitcoin, they generate $1 trillion of additional market cap just on the balance sheet maneuver. That's the first trillion. If they build it into an iPhone, you make another trillion. If you're smart, you have a $10 trillion asset in your cloud and you become a $10 trillion bank. If they do it, or they don't do it, right? The world's full of examples of empires topple because they did not embrace a new technology. The Romans needed the Etruscans to whiff, mm-hmm. and for the Greeks to take their eye off the ball, and then one thing leads to another, and when you get enough power, you start to become more closed-minded. Right? If you have enough money and enough power, you don't need to learn anything new. What we see going on right now is every single powerful person in the world is asked the question, "What do you think of Bitcoin?" Everybody, the premier of Russia, every world leader, every major investor, every major influencer, everybody's got to have an opinion. Ask yourself the question, how many of them spend 100 hours studying Bitcoin to form an opinion? I don't think there's a single person with a negative opinion that spent 100 hours studying it. I don't think you're out on the limb there. I just think the world's full of people that they haven't spent 10 hours studying it. And yet, if I walked up to you in 1900 and I said, I got electricity, I want you to put it in your building. I want you to put it into your carriage. I want you to put it into your ship. Or I want you to, you manufacture food, I want you to use electricity instead of steam power or mechanical power. Okay, how many people would stop and study it, and how many would think they would master it and figure it out with 1 hour of consideration? Would you know how to wire, Hershey's, Pennsylvania, or a meat packing plant, or a ship with electricity in 100 hours? 1,000 hours? How many hours does it take to figure it out? And what are the consequences of not figuring it out? I think the consequences are over 30 years, you go out of business, right?
Yeah. Let me ask this. This idea of moving energy between time and space, I think you and I, unsurprising to the audience, understand how valuable this asset is. We understand how much pristine collateral it provides. When you think about Bitcoin, there's a price that is attached to it. And the price goes up and down on a daily basis. It's priced in US dollar terms. There are short-term reasons why to pay attention to the price, especially if you're holding on a balance sheet of a publicly traded company like we talked about. But when you look out over the long term, I've heard you say things like it's going up forever, do not sell your Bitcoin, and other things that I don't want to make an assumption, but insinuate that you are going to hold Bitcoin for your lifetime. How do you think about price in that equation? Do you worry about it? Do you think about what it will be worth in US dollar terms in the future? Like, how do you think about price?
I think the only thing you got to do is figure out how much of it you can buy. And the reason to stop buying it would be you're buying it with leverage or with a mark-to-market loan that could cause you to get forced liquidated. So if you had $1 million sitting around, you just buy Bitcoin and hold it and wait. Can you borrow $10 million to buy Bitcoin? I wouldn't buy it at 20x leverage or 10x leverage or even 5x leverage or something, because the significance of price is you look at the volatility and you ask what's the the likelihood that it will trade down 50% and I'll get a margin call and force liquidated. If you have margin debt, you can theoretically get a margin call. If you have long dated debt, if you have a 7-year loan, we have a 7-year loan and we bought $500 million of Bitcoin at $36,000 a coin. What's the odds it'll be $36,000 a coin in 7 years? Well, I'm not so concerned about it. So I think the way to think of it is, here's my model for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price is going up because of inflation. Saifedean says 14%, right? We know that in the absence of everything else, if you had complete adoption, if 8 billion people had Bitcoin and we had world currencies and the US dollar was the world currency and we inflated it 14% a year, then you would think Bitcoin would go up 14% every year as the currency kept getting inflated. So the price of the dominant monetary network or dominant monetary asset goes up by inflation. And the second dynamic is adoption. There's a rip, right? That if there's $100 billion of demand for Bitcoin, then it's going to go up faster than the 14% because there's a short squeeze as people are trying to buy the stuff faster than the market wants to sell. And if you went from 1% adoption to 2% adoption, you could imagine that the price could double just because the adoption doubled, even in no inflation, right?
Correct.
And then the third driver is utility. If this is common sense, right? You ever send Bitcoin to anybody else on the main chain and you want to send $37 and it takes you an hour and you got a fee. And then when Cash App came out and said you could just send it via cash tag, or you get a Lightning, that's the proprietary way called Layer 3. And the Layer 2 Lightning way is I got a Lightning wallet and I zap it for 1 Satoshi in a split second. Remember the big smile that brings to your face?
It's pretty fun.
Okay. Did it not make you think that Bitcoin is more valuable? Like Bitcoin's utility explodes. If I can move the money at the speed of light on the Layer 2 or the Layer 3, and if I can do 1 billion transactions a day, or let's take El Salvador, right? 3 million people download a wallet and they start doing remittances. Is there demand for Bitcoin? Sure there is, right? So as the technical utility increases, as we go from, and by the way, the technical utility drives and feeds back into the adoption, right? Because there's 3 million people in El Salvador that now have maybe a bit of Bitcoin or the ability to buy Bitcoin in a split second that couldn't buy it 6 months ago. So if you look at a world going from 100 million people with what's low utility, I buy it and I hold it for 100 years. That's low velocity, 100 million adoption. 200 million and I move it every year. 400 million, 800 million, 1.6 billion. As the user count increases, that's going to drive things. But the adoption is not just user count, right? Like if you're building the model, you would say, well, how much money? People talk about Bitcoin and network effects and Metcalfe's law. Okay, again, if you're just looking at it in a cursory way, you're saying, oh, Metcalfe's laws apply. But if you're thinking a bit deeper about it, you're thinking, Newton's laws apply, right? Astrophysics applies. If you bring $100 billion to the network and you're one person, that's more important than if you brought $1 to the network and you're one person. And so you have to do a dollar-weighted assessment of adoption, right? And you would almost say the value of it is a function of the total amount of capital plus the velocity, right? What's the amount of money that shows up? What's the velocity of the money that shows up? What's the utility of the money that shows up? And when you think about it that way, it becomes pretty clear that as we march from one use case to 1,000 use cases, holding it is one thing, lending it out for yield is another thing. What if I put a lien on it? What if I can lock it up for 5 years? What if I can create a trust? What if I gave you a trust that's good for the rest of your life and the life of your firstborn child for the next 1,000 years? And it's an app and I just fund it with 2 Bitcoin. and you can't ever sell the Bitcoin, but you can live off of the yield of the Bitcoin for the next 1,000 years. It's an application, right? I can create insurance policies. I can create trust funds. What if I gave you a car, a Tesla car, and I put a Bitcoin in the car and the car refueled itself forever and maintained itself? It's a self-maintaining car, more valuable than a non-maintaining car, right? It's like I hand you something with an endowment, right?
Yeah.
So as that happens, as you get more money flowing on the network and more people flowing on the network and more utility flowing on the network, the price goes up. And does it go up forever? But why? Yeah, because as I said, it's the language of money. What's that mean? It's like English. Right? How long's been around? Long time. It's like base 10 math, right? Here's the thing about it, right? People don't get this part. Bitcoin is math, but it's a type of math. It's like base 10 math. The Bitcoin protocol is a protocol for money. Now, I hand it to you. You can either say, great, this is the dominant protocol for money. This is the winner, and I'm going to buy as much of it as I can. Or you can keep trying to commercialize base 16 math and base 32 math and base 2 math and base 4 math. And, the base 16 math. Base 10 math is not the only mathematical protocol any more than the metric system is the only system of measures. It happens to be one that we adopted. There's no reason to think it doesn't last 1,000 years. It could last 10,000 years, right? And that's the part that people don't get. So when I say it's going up forever, I'm saying, well, will the technology get better? Obviously. Will adoption increase? Well, I guess you could say it gets pegged out. When adoption is 8 billion people, when everybody's adopted it, technology keeps advancing, inflation continues in whatever other currencies exist, and at some point, theoretically, if all the other weak currencies failed, right? You think we go from 130 currencies to 100 to 30 to 12 to 10 to maybe one day there's the dollar and the CNY and you're down to 2, and then maybe we decide to throw away the dollar and the CNY and we get enlightened and we just use Satoshis. Yeah. And you get the perfect Austrian economics hard money, perfect thing. Maybe, doesn't matter to me if we do or we don't, but let's say we did. Well, then it goes up with the productivity of the civilization, right? Mm-hmm. Right. If the civilization is got 5% productivity growth and everybody's adopted the same money, then you've got 5% growth. And until that, you're going to have faster than the productivity growth because you're going to get these rips, these accelerations from technology and adoption and fiat inflation in the frame of reference, right? It's useful to see the frame of reference, right? Is your frame of reference the peso? Is it the bolivar? Is it the U.S. dollar? And in that frame of reference, then the price is going to adjust.
My brothers are going to join us here in a second to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
But my last question for you on this topic is, when you think about MicroStrategy, we always talk about MicroStrategy, right? Because that's the company that you run. But a lot of people will forget you actually made a very large personal Bitcoin purchase as well. Do you think about a difference in the decision-making between a person optimizing for this as like a balance sheet strategy versus a corporation? Or do you see those as the exact same thing?
I think for a person, you just say, how much money do I want to store for the next decade or maybe hold for life? How much long duration property? If I said you got to invest something for the next 30 years and give it to your grandchildren, hold it in the family endowment, I would put that amount of money in Bitcoin, right? The rest of your money is an investment. You're betting on Apple versus Facebook, or it's a speculation. I want to speculate on Doge versus SHIB because it's fun, or I want to gamble on the outcome of the Super Bowl because I think I know and it's fun, okay? And I think that all personal money falls into those three categories. It's either an investment, it's a speculation, or it's an endowment of a savings account. For a business, that's different because some businesses are traders. If you're a trader, if you think you can out-trade someone else, you're a business. You better be thinking about it 60 hours a week. You better have proprietary computers and proprietary models and know the markets and the arbitrages. Then you could trade maybe. I mean, Citadel trades, Renaissance trades. I mean, other people trade. Goldman Sachs trades. So I think they can be traders. And then also, when you get into business, right, businesses have other options. Like maybe they can raise capital, they can issue equity, they can issue debt. They're publicly traded. I have an army of lawyers and accountants so that I can do that. You don't as a family. So businesses don't have the same financing capabilities. People don't have the same financing capabilities that businesses do. And then your business has strategic assets. If you're Fidelity and you have trillions of dollars of fixed income, you can build it into your bonds. If you're a bank, you can build it into the bank. If you have a mobile app, you can build it in a mobile app. If you build phones or devices, you can build it into the device. One thing I think with a business is clear is you just should be laser-like focused, and you should think that when the dust settles, I need to be the best in the world at what I do, right? Like, for example, it wouldn't be a good idea for me to go into business competing with Fidelity, right? They have 11 trillion in assets. I'm not, I'm not going to launch a Bitcoin investment fund, right? I'm not. I mean, it's not for me. I'm not going to go in business against, Square or PayPal either, just because I think it's a good idea. So businesses need to be laser-like focused on competing and growing and in a creative fashion for their shareholders. And also businesses have shareholders to manage and shareholder relations. And so there's that phrase, if we want to go far, we need to go together. And so for a business, it's very important to have shareholder alignment. Would you rather have $10 billion of capital and get a 10% return, or no capital and get a 30% return, right? So a business has to keep their capital aligned. And so a lot of times they'll do things that are either optimized for their shareholders or they're optimized for their other constituencies. And businesses have regulatory nexus, right? Like there's certain things that I can't do if I'm a bank in China, right? Or if I'm a bank in the US, I can't. So businesses have compliance issues and individuals don't. So that's how I think about that.
You don't know this, but my two brothers run the Best Business Show research team, which is a very clever thing that they came up with. They also run a union that I've busted like 20 times. What questions do you guys have for
hopefully by the end of this, we're going to get Michael to join the union. This will be our recruiting
Bitcoin's
pitch.
a monetary union.
See, he's in.
It's a monetary union you should join. Eventually, everybody else will.
We're convinced.
What questions do you guys have?
So I listened to the entire interview. Fantastic, awesome stuff. But I have to ask one question around volatility. So you mentioned earlier MicroStrategy owns or holds over 100,000 Bitcoin. I think you've mentioned in the past how much you personally hold. But there's days where Bitcoin has obviously appreciated drastically over the last year, 10 years, et cetera. But Bitcoin also went from 65,000 call to 30,000 or 32,000 this year. What's going on days where you're looking on paper and it's going, hundreds of millions of dollars at some points down?
Look, I'm running the business just like any CEO is running the business. Like if you were to ask Jeff Bezos, what are you thinking about on days when Amazon stock is down? He would say, I'm not thinking about it. I'm thinking about fix the business, run the business, and the stock will take care of itself. And that's what I think. I'm looking out 7 years, right? I'm saying, how do we educate more people on Bitcoin? What's my next deal that I'm going to do? I mean, if my stock is down, I'm going to issue debt. If my stock is up, maybe I can do a convert, right? What about the software business? How are we going to deliver the best quarterly results we can deliver? You focus on the things you can control. So if I can control it, I'm going to do it. And the short-term volatility, you can't control, and so you just wait. You got to figure that in 7 years, the market will sort itself out. In 7 months, it likely will sort itself out. If you want to drive yourself insane, then you zoom in, and if I zoom in close enough, if I just look at 0.0001% of your face for 18 milliseconds, I bet I can find some protozoa bacteria crawling around somewhere and it'll freak me out, right? If I want to, right? Like you're driving yourself to apoplectic fits by inducing this anxiety. So the way I look at volatility is, actually, the truth is, I just say this: it's a benefit. Volatility is the price you pay to get 10x the performance of the S&P. If it wasn't volatile, then would I have been able to borrow $2.2 billion at 1% interest and buy $7.5 billion worth of it, starting with $250 million in capital? Like, I like the fact it's hard. I like the fact it's scary. I like the fact it's volatile. What you really want, this is what you should hope for in life. You should hope that you can see the future and you have a very strong opinion about the future, but that everybody else disagrees with you and they're getting bounced around. It's a bumpy ride. It's like, I'm taking you on a bumpy ride down the road. I'm going to bounce you this way and that way. And in 5 years, then there's a pot of gold at the end and there's only 2 seats. And there's 10 people, and only 2 of you can get on. So the 2 of you guys, you're like, oh, there's pot of gold at the end? Sorry, pot of Bitcoin at the end? Pot of Bitcoin at the end. Yeah, you're like, okay, well, we'll sign up for the bumpy ride. What else do we got to do? And everybody else is like fat, dumb, and happy, and they've all got plenty of everything, and they're comfortable in their life, and they're like, well, that doesn't look like a very comfortable ride. It's like, you know, a Jeep, and it's a desert, and it's a bumpy ride. We'll sit this one out. Can you just bring it to us? And it's, you know, what I said tongue-in-cheek about the FDIC statement. It's like, when every bank can hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, well, then every company is going to borrow hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars against their Bitcoin. Every bank's going to buy trillions of dollars of Bitcoin. The price is going to the moon. You're not going to be able to afford the Bitcoin. When I make it, you know, a smooth passage, you're going to wait until there's a train or a plane that flies across the country, or you're going to get in a wagon and you're going to go west, young man, right? So I'm like, the joke, of course, is it's volatility, but it keeps going up. People are like, well, how else do you want it to go up, right? I mean, like, it's going up with volatility. So I think it's a benefit, because it's volatility that pays off everybody that does the research and has any conviction. And it disproportionately benefits people that want to make the investment in the new world, and it transfers wealth away from people that are afraid of volatility. It's not really afraid of volatility. Amazon was volatile, right? I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money on Amazon. A lot of people made a lot of money, even venture capitalists, you know, accept extreme amounts of volatility. I think here you have an example of a liquid publicly traded asset, which is volatile, but in fact, it's still misunderstood by 98% of the public investors. So it's an asymmetric opportunity to buy something which is no less risky than investing in a big tech company, but much less understood. And I think probably the Sharpe ratios would actually bear that out. Correct. If we looked at volatility adjusted yield.
John, what questions you got?
Yeah, nice to see you again, Michael. So you have mentioned, and I tend to agree, that Bitcoin is digital gold and it's a store of value. I'm curious what your thinking is behind people, companies, and other countries using it as a medium of exchange. We've seen El Salvador adopt it. What are your thoughts around that?
I really think that for the next decade, the screaming home run architecture is digital currency as the US dollar on top of digital asset as BTC. And I think that every country really wants to move dollars around as the medium of exchange, because 100 million companies have their accounting systems wired for dollars. And I think they want to use the store of value. And I think if you had $100 and $99 are invested in Bitcoin and $1 is invested in the USD, you have 99% of the benefit. In fact, it's not even that. It's like you don't have to give up anything. If you have $1 million, you put $1 million into Bitcoin and you borrow $100,000 in USD, a stable coin, and then you pay your bill in the USD while the Bitcoin appreciates. So the net balance sheet ratio is 100% Bitcoin, but it doesn't make the currency go away. Right? Like MicroStrategy's got more than 100% of its balance sheet in Bitcoin, but we still use the currency. So what I think will happen, if you really want Bitcoin adoption to take off, you don't want to squeeze out the stable coins. I think that the USD stablecoin is actually going to drive the explosion in Bitcoin. The use case of stablecoins up until now has been crypto exchanges settling offshore, right? They're settling crypto exchanges. We didn't use stablecoins at MicroStrategy for anything. We don't use stablecoins to buy Bitcoin, right? So what you want is you want 8 billion people to use a stablecoin to buy coffee. And you also want Amazon and General Electric and Apple to remit cross-border treasuries in stablecoin. And why would you do that? Because you can move money at the speed of light on Saturday afternoon for free. And right now, MicroStrategy can't move money cross borders at the speed of light for free. Would we move USD by a stablecoin? Yeah. Would we move Bitcoin? Well, we might flash it into Bitcoin for a second, move it in another second, flash it back into USD, right? A la, Strike and Jack Mallers. We might do that. But I actually think that what the world wants, not just the world, every consumer in South America, Africa would love to have dollars in their wallet. They would also love, they know that now. Everybody knows that now. That's 100%, right? Everybody knows they want dollars in their wallet now. So the US dollar could spread to 6 billion people. It would spread to 8 billion people if the Chinese didn't block it, right? It'll spread to all 8 billion people. Now, they don't all know they want to hold their life savings in Bitcoin, but that's growing at a massive rate. That's spreading like a virus. Every government knows they want to control their currency. The strong governments will. The US will. The Chinese will. The EU will. The weak governments won't, right? Afghanistan, and Venezuela and places with hyperinflation, Zimbabwe, they will lose their currency privileges because they're weak. And who will they lose them to? To the dollar, right? So what I think is happening is you're just going to see an explosion in the dollar, an explosion in Bitcoin, an explosion in demand for money moving over Lightning rails. If you can move stablecoin over Lightning rails, that would accelerate the growth of Lightning, right? The killer application I want on my phone is a Lightning wallet with USD stablecoin and then Bitcoin, and to be able to move either of them at the speed of light in a programmatic fashion. And I think they both win. Who loses? And this is the key. There's too much. The dollar must lose so Bitcoin can win. No. Who loses is weak assets and weak currencies. Can you think of a weaker asset than Bitcoin? Every other investment asset, right? Especially gold, silver, commodities, land, weak value stocks, and big tech stocks. They're all weaker assets. So you see money flow there's 500 trillion of them, by the way, right? We have 500 trillion in weak assets. If you got the 10 trillion from gold, we'd be up by a factor of 10. So I think that weak assets flow to the strong asset, and then weak currencies. How many currencies in the world are weaker than dollar? Name one currency, fiat currency in the world, stronger than the dollar. None. They're all weaker. CNY is weaker. Every African currency, every Asian currency, everything. So 180 nominal currencies, a lot of them are pegged to the dollar, 130 floating currencies. They all can be replaced with the dollar. So who wins? Western banks, Western technology companies, Western hardware devices, the Western world, the United States, Western Europe. Who wins? Everybody that embraces Bitcoin, right? Who loses? The nation of gold, right? I mean, you want to declare war on something? Declare a war on gold. They don't have an army. They don't have an air force. There's no politicians running for office of president of gold. There's no city, state, country. No one is crying thinking that their way of life will come to an end if gold got demonetized. So if I had one request from the Bitcoin community, my request would be focus your guns on gold. Ultimately, gold is being demonetized. This is not speculation on the part of Michael Saylor. You have all the stats. It's been demonetized for the past decade, right? It doesn't have a country. It doesn't have an army. It doesn't collect taxes. There's not a single person on earth that is going to lie down in front of a tank to defend the nation of gold. And yet gold is the enemy, because gold is a dumb rock sitting. You can't mortgage your gold. You can't lean up your gold. It's hard to rent your gold or license it or develop it further. Gold is not big tech. You can't put gold on an iPhone. So ultimately, what you have is there are two things that should succeed and grow. The US dollar, if you live in the United States and you believe in Western values and freedom and justice, right, and Western law and the progressive movement, you want the US dollar to grow. And instead of saying, well, the dollar is like a problem to save, and forget about that, just point out that if you live in Africa and Asia, you would give your left arm to trade in dollars, right? So the dollar should expand on lightning rails, and Bitcoin should expand, and they go together, and we all win. We all win, right? The world's a better place. Every company, everybody wins. If you're going to compete, by the way, if you're going to compete with Square Cash App, then you might lose. If you're going to compete with Twitter, you might lose. If you're going to compete with the United States of America, you might lose. My advice is, you don't got to destroy the banks. You don't have to topple a government. You don't have to crush a currency. You don't have to stop a regulator. You don't have to, eliminate PayPal, right? You don't have to compete with all of them. You can buy Bitcoin. You want to compete with something, declare war on a dead rock, right? Declare war on the rock, right?
The rock has been losing for a while now.
And after you finish declaring war on the rock, declare war on dead property, right? Dead money, right? What are low velocity, I don't want to hold 500 acres in the middle of nowhere as a store of value. I don't want to hold 5 tons of rock as a store of value. I don't want to monetize these things. So if you start thinking that way and you think, I just want to take my monetary energy, put it into digital energy, and then I want to partner and ally with everything I find admirable, every great company, every great politician, every great country, right? Every great technology. Just be positive, be constructive, and we all go and we win together. The world will rebuild itself, right? It's going to rebuild itself. I would prefer that it rebuild itself in a peaceful, constructive, cheerful fashion, as opposed to, someone's got to lose so I could win. I think everybody can win, right? If we invent electricity and we invent math and we invent fire, isn't it highly likely the entire human race is better off because of math, fire, and electricity, right? I think, right? We can all win together, and so that's the way I see that.
Before we finish up, we've been going for 2 hours, but I know you and I could talk about this all day. If I just give you the floor to finish, when somebody says to you, why Bitcoin? What's your 2, 3, 4 sentence answer as to why has Michael Saylor, who had every option in the world to buy an asset and put it on your balance sheet or personally invest in, why Bitcoin?
Because I'd start by saying the human condition is elevated via the channeling of energy, and every great advance was a new form of energy, be it metallic energy in the form of steel or electrical energy or chemical energy. And Bitcoin is the next evolution of that, right? So the first reason is it's compelling and critical to the advance of the human race. The second observation is every successful investment idea in the 21st century was a digital transformation of music, digital transformation of entertainment, digital transformation of books, digital communications. Bitcoin's the digital transformation of everything else. Everything that didn't get transformed in the first chapter of the mobile wave comes next. So now we have digital transformation of gold, digital transformation of property, and digital transformation of energy. And for the first time in the history of the human race, you can literally take energy, transform it into something in cyberspace, store it forever, move it at the speed of light, program it, and eliminate the friction that is applied to that energy when it takes another form. Economically, energy is capital, right? We use the phrase capital. If you have digital capital, it's the digital transformation of capital, and capital is half of everything. If you sum up every piece of property, every corporation, the value of everything, it's all capital. You capitalized it. So if I capitalized everything and I stored it in 20th century instruments, I would store them in equity securities and bonds and titles to property. In the 21st century, I have the chance to capitalize the entire world economy and put it in a digital token we call Bitcoin. So why buy it? Because it's half of everything. It's literally half of everything, and it is the platform. It's the foundation upon which we build the 21st century economy. You could say 21st century cyber economy, but if you want to fix everything in the world, if I could eliminate the friction, move everything at the speed of light, make it immortal, oscillate it at 60 megahertz or faster, execute 1 million transactions a second and make it infinitely intelligent, wouldn't you think that that would be a good idea? Right? It's the future of capitalism.
There's not very many people who believe in this more than I do, but you may be one of them, because I think you and I see eye to eye on all of this. So I appreciate you taking the time to come in here. I appreciate you two sitting around and watching this entire thing, coming and asking some questions. They'll be taking virtual laps for weeks now because you even hinted at the fact that you may be open to joining their union. I appreciate everyone watching at home. Please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you to SoFi for sponsoring the Best Business Show. And we have lots and lots to go over after this conversation, but we'll be back tomorrow. And I think that's it. Go follow Michael on Twitter. I don't know if we've got anything else. I don't know if you
Thanks
need
for
any
having
more.
me.
I don't know if you need any more Twitter followers, but
I got one more question.
oh,
What?
Jesus.
Go ahead.
We talk about
Don't ask me what the price is going to be.
no, I won't ask you. No.
Tired of that question.
No, we talk about Bitcoin being good for business all the time, and I think part of that is obviously the price has appreciated. So anyone who has been involved has benefited from that. But part of it is also just the community aspect of it, right? And how powerful that is. Is there a specific point in time where you were like, "Holy crap! Like this is wild. These people are really strong. They're really passionate."
I think that every single month that's gone by, I've just been more impressed with the community ethos. If you look at our press release, when we first bought Bitcoin and we said why we bought it, one of the lines we put in the press release is we're persuaded by the community ethos, by the community itself, that this is digital gold and it's harder and it's smarter and it's stronger and it's faster than gold. And I think that came out of all my research before we actually made that announcement. And the way you figure out the community's passionate is you do your research and you study all the influencers, you look at all the podcasts and you read all the books. And you couldn't come to any conclusion other than the asset is differentiated it based on the community ethos. I even tweeted this. I made this point, and I guess I'll elaborate right now. I said, the character of the asset determines the character of the owners determines the destiny of the asset, right? The character of the people that own something. If you own like Joe Random Yo-Yo coin and you're owning it to flip it on Saturday night, depending upon which way a football game goes, okay, that's the destiny of the asset, right? It's going to be short term because the people are short term. Whenever you buy anything, you got to ask yourself the question, what's the character and what's the intent and what's the strategy or the belief system of the people that are buying the thing that I'm buying? If I buy real estate in New York, right, you'll eventually sell it to someone else who swears that New York is the apex city